Hi everyone, I'm Robert Owens, and this is my capstone project for the Engineering Management program at UTC. The question I set out to answer is simple. Does battery storage make economic sense for hotels that want to add EV charging? The answer turns out to be much more interesting than the literature would lead you to believe. The industry promise is seductive. Hotels need EV charging. Grid upgrades cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Batteries supposedly avoid these upgrades, shave demand charges, and pay back in under 2 years. The technology works, the algorithms are mathematically sound, so if everything's supposedly fine, what's actually going wrong in the field? What's going wrong is this. Deployed projects consistently underperform. Payback periods stretch 2 to 3 times longer. Savings come in 30 to 50% below forecast. Most projects fail to break even, and the industry's long-time answer has been to blame the algorithms or the battery chemistry. Well, I'm going to show you a different answer. Here's how I got there. 6 phases. I extracted 47 tariffs from PDF sources. I acquired load profiles for 64 hotels. I wrote 8 utility-specific rate calculators, about 13,000 lines of code backed by 500 tests. I ran 10 optimization stories with over 4,000 simulations, and everything culminates into 5 case studies in a live dashboard at bestcapstone.com. Phases 2 through 6 are fully automated. One command. Now here's the discovery that reframed this whole project. I reviewed 47 peer-reviewed BEST papers published since 2020. 0 of them, not one, accurately modeled commercial utility rates. They all use simple dollar per kilowatt demand charges and basic time of use tiers. Real tariffs have ratchets, variable riders, critical peak pricing, demand-dependent energy blocks. None of that appears in any published model. The algorithms were sound, they were just solving the wrong problem. That reframing produces 3 research questions. How accurately do industry standard tools model real tariffs? Does battery sizing matter more than dispatch sophistication or the reverse? And what fraction of hospitality BEST projects actually achieve economic viability under current conditions? We'll resolve each of these in the results section. The methodology. Before I get into results, a word on scale. This is production-grade research infrastructure. About 139,000 lines of code, 126,000 lines of documentation, 501 automated tests with 0 failures, over 1,000 commits across 205 days, computationally, 4,208 simulations, 433 million decision variables with 144 million time series intervals processed. This rivals what commercial energy analytics platforms are shipping. The rate infrastructure deserves particular attention. 31 base tariff schedules, 8 variable riders, 4 event overlays, each single one manually extracted from a PDF source document with every rate cited back to the specific line. 47 JSON files on a version 7 schema, and rather than blindly trust the generic model, I wrote 8 utility-specific calculators, 1 per utility, totaling nearly 13,000 lines, each unit tested. The data set, 64 buildings across 8 utilities in 6 states. The peak demand spread is 87 times, from a 22 kilowatt property to a nearly 2 megawatt property. That matters because it means the findings apply across the full spectrum of hospitality buildings, not just one segment. The experimental structure. 10 stories, each isolating one variable so its contribution is measurable end to end. Stories 5 through 7 are the dispatch block. That's where the most dramatic results come from. Story 10 is the novel contribution, joint optimization of thermal load and battery dispatch. No published work combines these in one linear program. Story 1, size batteries the way most installers do. 50% of peak demand with 4-hour duration. Yes, every building saved money on its bill, but the capital cost of the battery was so large that only 6 out of 64 buildings earned back the investment over 20 years. Mean NPV was negative $213,000 per building. One EPB building installed a 581 kilowatt battery and destroyed $550,000 in value. Oversized batteries break the economics. Story 2. I swept 30 battery sizes per building, 1,920 simulations. The NPV curve is parabolic, and the peak sits at 25% of peak demand, exactly half the industry rule. A battery half the size captures about 80% of the savings at 59% lower capital cost. Viability doubles from 9 to 20%. Just right sizing recovers $210,000 per building. Story 3. Are these results robust to assumptions? 960 runs sweeping the 5 most cited economic parameters. Electricity escalation dominates. Discount rate is second, energy cost third, and O&M is fourth. In the parameter most commonly cited as the project blocker, battery cost ranks dead last. Our results are driven by macroeconomic assumptions, not battery chemistry. Story 4. I validated against REOPT, NREL's industry standard tool. It works for 53% of buildings, but for 47%, REOPT produces unusable results. And these aren't parameter tuning issues. There are 4 specific schema limitations in the underlying URDB rate database. Negative off-peak rates in RMP 6A, missing compounding riders in the LADWP A2B plan, demand-dependent energy blocks in EPB GSA2, additive rider interactions in ConEd SC9. This is what validates the need for utility-specific calculators. Now to the results. Here's the answer to research question 1. Industry tools fail for 47% of the buildings in this portfolio. These aren't parameter tuning problems. They're 4 specific schema limitations in the URDB rate database that REOPT relies on. Negative off-peak rates can't be represented. Compounding riders, invisible to REOPT. Demand-dependent energy blocks, not expressible. Additive rider interactions, miscomputed. Each one is documented, and together they render half the portfolio unusable. Research question 2, part 1. Does sizing matter? Enormously. Right sizing from the 50% industry rule to the 25% optimum lifts mean MPV by $210,000 per building. Viability doubles from 9 to 20%, but 20% viability is still a failing grade. If the story stopped here, the honest conclusion would be that hospitality best just doesn't pencil. So watch what happens next. Story 5. Same batteries, we just replaced the rule-based charge-discharge heuristic with a linear programming dispatch optimizer. Portfolio savings nearly double, from $847,000 to $1.66 million per year. That's a 96% improvement with 0 additional hardware. 29 buildings that were losing money become profitable. Viability jumps from 19 to 64%. The sizing versus dispatch dichotomy the literature frames as a trade-off, it's false. Both are essential. Story 6. So what's actually inside the peak demand number? We decomposed each building's load into end uses. Cooling averages 37% of peak demand, up to 74% in some buildings. 20 of the 64 buildings exceed 50% cooling at peak. Flexibility index averages 67%. This sets up story 10. If we can shift when the air conditioner runs, not how much, we reduce peak demand without cycling a battery. Story 7. Until now, we've optimized sizing and dispatch sequentially. Size first, then dispatch. Story 7 collapses them into a single joint LP. The result? 75% of the portfolio is viable, with $17.9 million in total MPV. 6 utilities hit a perfect 8 out of 8. LADWP and XL are still stuck at 0. The barrier there is structural, not strategic. LADWP stacks compounding riders, so every kilowatt hour of throughput gets penalized. And XL has a 50% demand ratchet that no battery-only strategy can overcome. Story 8 adds a third dimension, rate plan selection. We tested 24 buildings against their utilities alternative tariff. APS's critical peak pricing adds $591,000 in portfolio NPV, so all 8 APS buildings should enroll. SCE's CPP doesn't beat the base time of use plus BESS for a single building. And LADWP's experimental rate XRT is a cautionary tale. A naive comparison made it look beneficial, but only because it inflated the baseline. A 4-scenario audit reveals it actually costs more. The method generalizes. Story 9, reality check. 832 sensitivity runs along 3 axes. Round trip efficiency between 70 and 90%, minimal impact. The LP just resizes the battery. Battery degradation, linear versus accelerating, 1 building difference. But operational availability, missing peak events, dominates. 4 missed months drops viability from 48 to 30. Combined realistic scenario, lower RTE, 2 missed months, accelerating degradation, 45 of 64 are still viable at 9.3 million. Sure, a 48% haircut, but the majority survives. The key here is actually responding to every peak event. Story 10, the novel contribution. What if the air conditioner helps the battery? We build a single LP that co-optimizes battery sizing, battery dispatch, and HVAC scheduling against the real tariff, including ratchets and riders. 94% viability, 39.4 million in portfolio NPV, more than double of Story 11. LADWP conservatively flips from 0 of 8 to 4 of 8, and moderately 6 of 8. XL flips from 0 of 8 to 8 of 8. The cooling shift bypasses that rider barrier, and when we layer CPP enrollment on top of thermal, APS gains another 855,000. To my knowledge, no published research combines BESS, cooling load scheduling, and demand charge optimization in a single LP. Research question 3, viability. It's 9% under industry standard rules. Optimal sizing doubles it to 20. LP dispatch triples it to 64%. Joint sizing and dispatch reaches 75%. Thermal flexibility pushes all the way to 94. Each step contributes incremental, non-substitutable value. You cannot skip any of them. 13 buildings remain structurally non-viable even at the full stack. 8 XL, 4 LADWP, and 1 APS. For those, no amount of optimization can overcome the rate design. Contributions and limitations. 6 contributions. First, the tariff-accurate pipeline itself. PDF to JSON to 8 calculators, all unit tested. Second, the 3-class validation that quantified REOP's 47% failure rate with 4 specific name modes. Third, the finding that sizing and dispatch are codependent, not substitutable. Fourth, the joint optimization LP. Fifth, the 4-scenario rate plan audit method. And finally, thermal co-optimization. No published work combines BESS, cooling scheduling, and demand charges in a single linear program. And now an honest assessment. Synthetic Comstock data, not actual metered consumption. It's a single value stream. We modeled demand charge management only. No frequency regulation or capacity markets were integrated. I've not yet validated against real customer bills. Perfect foresight in the LP, though Story 9 quantifies that reality gap. Geographic scope was limited to the 8 utilities, and Story 10 assumes buildings support HVAC pre-cooling control, which isn't universal. The results are directional. The methodology is the contribution, not the specific dollar amounts. Closing on the scale, 4,208 optimizations, 433 million decision variables across those runs, 144 million 15-minute time series intervals were processed, 139,000 lines of code, 501 passing tests with 0 failures, 1,042 commits over 205 days, 10 gigabytes of reproducible repository. This is production-grade infrastructure, not a prototype. And finally, everything you've seen today, it's not the easiest to digest, and that's by design. Utility tariffs are purposely complicated and hard to parse. If it was easy, we wouldn't have needed any of this to answer the basic questions. That complexity also presents a unique opportunity to visualize and understand. So I'd like to invite you to explore the data in my project dashboard and take a tour at bestcapstone.com. Thanks for watching. I'd like to extend a special thanks to Dr. Jennifer Goodrich and my committee members who supported me as the investigation and project took shape. Your feedback was invaluable. Now for some extra details in the appendix slides on assumptions and case studies. These are the economic assumptions for reference. 5% discount rate per OMB A94, 2.5% escalation per EIA AEO, NREL ATB 2024 for battery cost, 20-year project lifetime with a midlife replacement, and critically, we deliberately excluded the 30% investment tax credit, state incentives like California SGIP, and favorable CPACE financing due to market uncertainty. Real-world economics would be more favorable than what I've presented today. 5 case studies. 4 out of 5 achieved positive NPV under joint LP. The one failure, LADWP 25927, proves the methodology identifies both winners and losers honestly. The EPB building on the right shows the full journey. Industry standard sizing melts $550,000. Right sizing recovers to $138,000. Joint LP holds that gain with the battery 1/5 the original size. $691,000 in total NPV swing from the same building.